10, 9, ignition sequence start. All engines are running.
Roger, the clock is operating. We're underway.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And it is a small leap, but a giant step for us, right into Episode-8, 12 Years, a Kerbal Knot.
What?
I am your LMP, that's Lunar Module Pilot, Biff Aldrin. And with us, our CMP, Command Module Pilot,
Nostromo.
Coming up in today's program, we'll update you on our progress within the game.
We introduce a new segment called Beginner's Minute.
We'll also hear your letters in Crew Report.
We have news in the mission briefing.
And another episode of
As the Kerbin Turns. In our But I Digress segment, we talk about the movie Prometheus.
And in this week's podcast, we're going to start out a little bit differently than we normally do. You've heard us talking about something called mod statistics, and you've heard quite a bit of opinion about it. In our program today, we're actually going to hear from the creator of that mod, Majir.
We had a chance to interview him this week, and our first question was, what is mod statistics and what does it do?
It's a plugin that is designed to be very lightweight and run in the background and be packaged with other plugins. And there's some other plugins that do this, like Toolbar and some others. And I'd say this one, I spent a lot of time in making sure that it would really work well being distributed and packaged with other plugins, and it solves a lot of problems that we've had there. But the idea is that we had a lot of questions that we wanted to answer about how people are using our mods. And when I say we, I mean sort of the general modding community, in particular the Modders IRC channel. And one of the biggest questions that we had was what mods are used with our mods. So for example, if I'm trying to figure out, do I want to add toolbar support to Kethe? I want to know, do any of my users actually use toolbar? What if I want to add compatibility with Kerbal Attachment System? Do any of my users actually use that? And I pitched this idea to some of the modders a few months ago now, and their response was, yeah, we have no clue what's going on. A lot of people say, I have no idea how many people use my mods because I put it up on Spaceport and some other places, and I don't have download statistics. I don't know what kind of people, if they're using it with lots of mods or just a few, and this has a really big impact on development. So what mod statistics does is it mainly reports back to a server that I run the plugins that you're using and some other information like how long you ran your game for, just so we have an idea of like, all right, is this mod played for hours at a time or just a few minutes?
Okay, so that's what mod statistics does.
But opinions on it are very strong, and we heard some of those in last week's podcast. So we asked Majir if he had any response.
Yeah, I want to mention a few things. The first is that in my thread, I very specifically ask modders, if you're going to include this with your mod, please display this notice prominently in your thread so that users know what's going on. And one of the reasons for that is actually in the KSP forum rules. It says, if you contact a remote server, you must tell your users exactly what you're doing and lay it all out for them, and not making any kind of fine print anywhere, but really display that prominently. And so I've done that in my thread, and I've asked that other people do the same. And another thing is that, yes, it does. I wouldn't say it installs itself automatically. It comes with other mods, right? But also, when you launch the game for the first time with that mod installed, it will say, hey, you've recently installed a mod that has mod statistics with it. It'll prompt you for if you want to have automatic updates, and it will link you to the forum thread for more information where, again, prominently are instructions if you'd like to opt out and a whole lot of other information in the FAQ there. So I would say, insofar as it's automatic, yes, it's very automatic. It's also not hiding. And one thing I really specifically want to respond to from the earlier podcasts is it seems there were some comments about how you might need to have coding knowledge to remove it, or it might, depending on how it's included, it might be really hard to remove. And that's really not the case. I actually spent a lot of time building it so that it would be more noticeable than any other kind of mod. Actually, what it does is it creates a folder named mod statistics right in your game data folder on the first boot. So even if some modder has packaged it and they've hidden it away because they don't want you to know about it, mod statistics will make itself visible, and it will create a file that has instructions right in that. It's a settings file, and it has instructions right in there for how to manipulate that settings file to disable it. And most settings files are, maybe they have some defaults, but this really, I went out of my way to make it easy to find and remove. And for some technical reasons, if you don't follow those instructions on how to remove it, then you may run into some trouble. But really, it's there's no situation in which you would need coding knowledge or anything beyond sort of a basic user's knowledge on working with files.
And with that in mind, our next question was, do you have any plans of adding an opt-out feature in the future?
You know, I've had a lot of people commenting about this, and you guys are certainly not the first. I'm not a big fan of that suggestion, and there are some other suggestions that I do want to pursue, and a lot of this is sort of waiting on point 24. But one of the things that I would really like to do is make it so that the user doesn't have to edit any files, even if they are just text files, even if it doesn't require programming knowledge. It would be really nice if it was much more of just a button you click in the game, right? At the same time, since this is something that is packaged with mods, I really don't want to have like a button that appears on all your screens at all the time. That would really get annoying really fast. And so what I would like to do is 0.24 is bringing some features that are going to make things a lot nicer for modders and building UIs that are really nicely integrated with the game. And so what I'd like to do is when the 0.24 cycle comes out, push out an update that opens a little control panel with that built-in UI so that it's much easier to have even fine-grained control and say, you know, I'd like to send this, but not this, and that sort of thing. The reason I would not like to do a strictly opt-in scheme is that frankly speaking, barely anybody's going to opt in if that's the case. And there's an interesting. A lot of people have pointed to Kerbal Space Program and their sort of pop-up that they put up at the beginning. And I looked into it. It's actually a little deceptive. Kerbal Space Program doesn't let you opt out at all in terms of sending any data at all. It does let you opt out of some very specific data related to the like the achievements tracking that they put in. But Kerbal Space Program tracks you regardless of what you click on in that page. What I have done, you know, you guys talked about it on your show. I've certainly looked at trying to make sure that the data is not going to accidentally leak anything. And so some people say, hey, could you track this, because that would be really, you know, I can't imagine why people would be upset at that. And I said no, because if something does go wrong, if there's a bug in the game or something, that could, like, for example, leak somebody's username. And so I've really rigorously avoided that sort of thing. I think what you and some others had commented on one of the previous shows was, you know, hey, you know, this Majir guy, he's probably got good intentions, but what if this spins out of his control? And I didn't really know how to respond to that other than to say that it's sort of, from a technical standpoint, none of that is really valid. And I think one of you mentioned, well, you know, somebody could modify this mod and release it so it sends things to a different server. Well, yes, that's true. They could also just load malware on your computer. You know what I mean? Like, in terms of the opt-outness of it, I think my responsibility is to really inform the user and let them make that decision. Prompting somebody to uncheck a box immediately, I think you can see most people are just going to uncheck it without really even considering what they're doing.
All right, thank you. That is part one of our interview with Majir, creator of Mod Statistics.
And we'll have the rest of that interview in episode 9 of Kerbalcast.
And now it's time for this week's progress report, where we update you on our progress within the game.
I want to go first.
Okay.
Okay, so you talked last week about making a giant rocket going straight toward the sun, and then just turning around, coming back, like once you left Kerbin's orbit.
Yeah, the Kerbin system.
Yeah, once you left the Kerbin system, just to flip around and come right back and get a whole bunch of science.
Right.
So, you know, there's science and then there are hills, and I was going after it. And so
there's science in them there hills.
I slapped together this monstrosity and make a spider web of struts all over it. Mm-hmm. And I just, you know, I launch it and crash that one. But then I built another one that was a little bit better. And so I launch it, and I leave the Kerbin system. I see Kerbin escape, which was really cool, because I hadn't seen anything like that before.
Can I make an observation at this point?
What is that?
You seem a little excited.
It was cool. Okay, we're not at the cool part yet. Now, there was
we're not. Okay.
There was one other time that I left the Kerbin system. And that's whenever I accidentally I wanted to see how far I could go with the rocketry I had, and I just completely launched Jebediah, like, who knows where, and I just reverted the whole thing because there was no way I was getting back. But this time, I thought I could maybe get back. So I see Kerbin escape, and I hit it, and the moment I hit it, I see that I'm now starting to make an orbit high around the sun, and it's just about the size of Kerbin's orbit. So I get there, I do my EVA, my crew report, my science juniors, my GOO, like all that stuff. And then I flip around and try to come back. Well, I either spent too long doing it or had too much time warp, or what I think actually happened was the nav ball...
You know, it's just a jump to the left.
Yeah. The nav ball is sort of changed its orientation because I guess it does its orientation off of whatever...
Yeah, whenever you change... It orients itself to whatever, like when you're within the Kerbin system, it's oriented to that.
Like the gravitational body?
Yeah, when you get outside of it, it automatically changes.
Okay, so it flipped over to the sun. See, I was going off of where it was on the nav ball. So instead of going to the opposite of where I was with the nav ball at that time, I marked where I was on the nav ball and went to the opposite of that. So it took me to wacky places. Like my orbit started, I was like, wait, that's not right. And all of a sudden, I'm lost in space, and so I need to
danger, Will Robinson.
I need to get back somehow, and so I'm sitting there. I'm just playing with the navigation, the maneuver node, and I'm just.
What's
trying
your fuel look like at this point?
Decent.
Okay.
Like I could, if I found out how to do it, I could make it back. If I did too many wrong maneuvers, I wasn't. So
what do I always say? F5 is your friend.
I did F5. Okay. And so there were a couple times where I was like, nope, that's not it. That's not it. That's not it. So I was like, okay, F9 to reload, F9 to reload. And eventually I did make it back. But it was even cooler than that. So I transmitted the science that I had from, just anything that would transmit at 100%, I did.
Right.
So on the way back, my orbit, or my path back to Kerbin,
right,
intersected the Mun.
Your trajectory.
My trajectory back to Kerbin intersected the Mun orbit. So I made just a pass by, and I got I had 4 mystery goo capsules on there, so I got some from there. I forgot to get the EVA and I forgot to get the crew report, mainly because I was just excited because I was passing by it. But I just skimmed right past it and then went and landed on Kerbin. And so, and I made it back, and I had a ton of science. And so I unlocked, I did what you said, and I unlocked all the gigantic rockets.
Right.
So I had gigantic, things that didn't fit with all the stuff I previously had. They were so big. And luckily I had the converters and stuff to where I could, make something that wasn't just
doing everything I say is going to get you into trouble.
Yeah. But so far it paid off. But I'll probably stop now.
That's what your mom said.
Yeah. So I threw all those together, and I made a gigantic rocket. And we actually we got to spend last Friday.
We?
Yeah, the two of us.
We. Okay.
Yeah. We. Not.
I thought you brought the royal we in.
Oh, no.
Who's we?
Biff and I actually
I got you. I'm with you.
Got to participate in an interview, and
we'll edit that part out too.
Yeah, got to participate in an interview with the Hood left-handed, and we're always afraid we pronounce things wrong. So feel free to call us out.
Yeah, it was the squad after party.
Yeah, I was on KSP TV, the Twitch TV channel, and so we were on there, and we were just talking with him while he's launching stuff. And so I was watching the rockets he was building. And he built some giant monstrosity rockets, and I was like, I want to build one of those, and I had the parts now. So I threw one of those together. And by the way, we had a lot of fun on that Twitch TV cast. That was really fun talking with you guys, and the whole chat stream and everything. It was fun.
It was amazing. You're talking about he built that giant rocket and everything.
Yeah.
He did it while he was talking to us.
Yeah.
It's like I can hardly walk and chew gum at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, if I had tried to do that while I was talking to somebody, my rocket would probably have the capsule would be on the side of it or something, and it wouldn't even have an engine or something.
Yeah. About the best I could do is if I was telling you what I was doing, it would be the most boring Twitch TV cast ever. And now I'm clicking this and moving over here. I know you see that, but if I said anything else, I wouldn't have been able to do it.
I wouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
Now I'm selecting the tank. Now I'm moving the tank.
So
now I'm connecting the tank.
We were watching that, and I saw him build those giant rockets, and it looked really cool. So I built one, and I took off, and I was like, I'm going to orbit the Mun. And he actually gave me a good piece of advice, is that whenever the Mun is rising is the best time to launch to get into the Mun's orbit. So I made 2 passes around the Mun and back. And I'd been working on Rendezvous for so long that I had actually, it's like whenever you said you were working on it, it sort of became work.
Yeah.
And building a massive rocket and flying it out there and trying to maneuver around and to these giant celestial bodies was the coolest feeling.
Right.
Like, I was like, whoa, okay. So it totally got me back into the feel of the game, because when you first start, building a rocket's cool, or building a plane is cool. Trying to, watching it explode or launching it or seeing any of that stuff is really cool.
Yeah.
And I sort of hit a rut where I was like, okay, I have to really work on this skill. So I kind of took a break from it, from Rendezvous, and I was like, I just want to build something massive, and I just want to see how far it goes. And so, I went out there and I cycled the Mun twice and got all my signs from it. And I put RCS on there because I just recently got RCS, but I didn't put any RCS tanks on there. So it was like I would hit R and do like a quick pulse and turn it off, and I managed to get it to where I had enough fuel to make it home, and then I made it home on that one. And for a second there, I almost got lost with that rocket too, and I realized I had created a maneuver, like multiple maneuvers, and
So like maneuver nodes?
Yeah, maneuver nodes,
okay.
and they had all stacked, and I thought I deleted all of them, but there was some that were still there, and so it was pointing me in the wrong directions. So always check to make sure all of your maneuver nodes are gone, because that can really throw you off.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was my experience this week, and it was really cool. And like every time I get on there, I'm like, I'm just gonna build something massive and launch it. So it's kind of like my stress ball as far as Kerbal Space Program goes. Whenever I'm tired of Rendezvous or whatever I'm working on, I'm just gonna, next I'm gonna try to actually land something. I don't plan on it coming back. I'm not I just really want to get something to land. Just send a probe and get it to land, and then later on I'm gonna try to see if I can actually send a Kerbal there and have him run around.
You sent me a text when you did this.
Yeah, I did.
And it included a couple of exclamation points.
Yeah.
And I know that this was a game, Kerbal was a game that you would not have chosen for yourself.
Yeah.
You when I suggested that we do this podcast, I told you I'd buy you a copy of the game, and you started playing it. When you sent me that text, that was the moment I could tell you got hooked.
Yeah, it's
because you had that adrenaline rush and that sense of accomplishment.
Uh-huh.
And when I saw that text, I went, "Oh, he's hooked."
Yeah, I said on that Twitch TV thing that we guested on, and I just said it to him a time or two. I'm not a simulation gamer. Like I don't like doing any simulation things or any civilization kind of simulation things. I really like actiony kind of stuff. I like running around blowing stuff up and very fast paced kind of games. And so getting into something like Kerbal,
but you blow everything up in Kerbal.
Yeah, but there's a lot of build up to it. I don't just get the boom explosions.
Yeah.
And this is earlier we were talking about the downfall of Michael Bay movies, and I'm like, it's just all explosions. And right now I'm like, I like explosions. But,
explosions, cool. They rock.
But it was I really hit that eureka moment where I was like, I found the thing that I'm gonna really love about this game is whenever you're just flying through there and I'm just trying to figure out how exactly I'm gonna get home.
Right.
So I'm pulling, and I noticed that I really like games that are centered around any sort of escape thing. My favorite game's Half-Life 1, and you're trying to escape this big facility, you're trying to find your way out. Or my favorite part of Minecraft is the first couple of days when you're trying to find out how to survive. And I really like about Kerbal Space Program whenever I was out there and I was like, how do I get this rocket home, and will I? Do I have the fuel? Do I have, all the equipment to? Because I made it really far out here, and now I'm no longer even in orbit of Kerbin. And so whenever I had to, get into that know-how of okay, let's experiment with this, let's see if this works, it really hooked me.
This is something that I've said before. There is a sense of accomplishment that you can get in this game that is unlike the sense of accomplishment you get in anything else, because it's part of that very steep learning curve. When you manage to do something that you have not been able to do, you feel like, I really did something. I really learned something. It's like when I did my first Rendezvous and Dock, it was like, the clouds parted.
Yeah.
And this shaft of sunlight came down and said, you rendezvoused, you docked.
You made it.
You have been anointed. You are a docker.
You're now a shooter.
You're a Rundy Ducker. I have no idea where I'm going with that. But I mean, seriously, you really do get a sense of accomplishment in the game because it really, truly is. It's a game of skill, and you really have to learn what you're doing to advance to the next stage. I mean, the more you do in the game, the more you can do in the game.
Yeah, it was just, you had
I think that's their official slogan, by the way.
What, me stuttering for a couple seconds?
No, Kerbal Space Program. The more you do, the more you can do.
Yeah. I mean, that really is true.
Hey, I get a nickel every time someone says that.
Okay, so what's your progress?
My progress. Okay, now you know that that I had been working towards getting to Eve, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I in the last podcast I talked about how I came into I got to Eve, and I came in an orbit that was so far outside of it that I had to basically burn up all of my fuel just to stabilize and get back. I was able to do science, but it was all science high above Eve before I came back. So what I did this time was I was more focused on getting to Eve, and I'll talk about this later in Crew Report because I had asked in the last podcast for some help on something, and I got some help, and it really worked out. Now I can deorbit. How would you call it? Is it interplanetary transfer, I guess? I can go from one planetary system to another.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I hope you weren't looking at me for answers on that.
No,
I was like,
for just an instant, I was wishing that this was video so everyone could see the expression you just made. I was struggling for the right term, and you're over there making this face like, what the heck is he talking about?
Imagine a turtle going into its shell at a
Yeah.
Like,
But yeah, thanks to some helpful listeners, I was able to do the interplanetary transfer and get to Eve and come in on an orbit that was a fuel saver. So what I did was I got into an orbit around Eve, and I would deorbit, and I ran into a problem where, because Eve has a very thick atmosphere, okay? And I would deorbit, and I would be coming in, and I had the little, the Poodle engines, the ones that have the 220 thrust.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I actually unlocked that.
Well, I had my lander craft. It's a center tank, and then there's 4 tanks around it. So there's 5 engines. Okay, there's 5 tanks and 5 engines. And when I was deorbiting, once I got low in the atmosphere, I could not, even at full power, I could not generate enough thrust to slow me down enough to land. So I had to, as I had said before, I had to use my parachutes. Well, the problem I had was every time I got to where the parachutes would finally deploy, it would literally rip the capsule off the top half of my spaceship.
Wow.
Yeah, and the bottom half of it would plummet to the ground and explode, and the capsule would come gently floating down, which, that's a nice soft landing, but kind of hard to get back up in orbit when you don't have anything but a capsule.
Yeah, and like if you launch a rescue mission, that just means more capsules will keep falling.
Yeah.
You're like, well.
So what I ended up doing, because I kept F9ing, and I did everything I could think of to try and land on Eve. And it finally became pretty obvious that with the craft configuration that I had, there was just no way, because I didn't have enough thrust to slow down the craft without the parachutes, and using the parachutes tore the thing all to pieces. So there was no way I was going to land on Eve on this mission. So what I decided to do instead, the moon that orbits Eve is a moon called Gilly, or as I like to call it,
her name is Gilly and she's at it again, causing lots of ruckus like a barnyard hen. She's always bringing trouble, her hair looks like a bubble. Knock, knock, who's there? It's Gilly.
Gilly. What? What was that?
What was that? Saturday Night Live used to do a sketch. Kristen Wiig, she had a character called Gilly.
Oh.
It was like the most annoying sketch you can imagine. But the name of the moon is Gilly, so of course automatically it made me think of that song. But anyway, yeah, Eve has a moon called Gilly.
Don't play that again.
Oh,
no. Just keep going.
Eve has a moon called Gilly, and it really looks like a captured asteroid, okay? Because it's just basically a rock. And it really isn't even shaped. It's not in a nice round shape. It's very oblong and kind of odd shaped. So I decided, since I couldn't land on Eve this trip, I decided I was going to go ahead and land on Gilly instead. And so I got into Gilly orbit, and I deorbited and landed, and that's when I discovered that the gravity on Gilly is so slight that the minute I would touch down, I would immediately start to float back up.
Huh.
And so what I ended up having to do is I turned on my RCS, and you know how you can use your RCS to go up and down. When I touched down, I just stood on my on the button that kept the RCS pushing me down until I nulled out all of my momentum.
Wow.
Yeah, I had to do that, and then of course when I did my EVA, it's like the guy was like, the minute he stepped off the ship, he started floating away. Because, I mean, if you touched at all, it's like it almost immediately started to push you back up.
It's like a rubber planet.
Yeah, exactly. It was like, the flubber planet.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I did that. I redocked with my tanker that I had in orbit. Because as I had talked about in the last podcast, I had a tanker around Kerbin, one around the Mun, one around Minmus, and then I had one in Eve orbit. And so what I was able to do is I was able to refuel, and I decoupled a tank off of that and balanced it on the nose of my craft, and I used that to return back to the Kerbin system and then deorbit on Kerbin and come in. Total science for this mission was 1177.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was more science than I had gotten when I left the Kerbin system.
Yeah, that's not bad for, not making it to Eve.
Yeah.
That's pretty good consolation prize.
Well, do you want to that wraps it up for our progress report, right?
Well, we have a news segment.
The Beginner's Minute. And the idea is that for people that are absolutely brand new to this game, and there's a lot. Steam had their summer sale, and Kerbal Space Program for a while there was $16.19.
Yeah, like a little under $10 off.
Yeah. And a lot of people, because this is what got me into the game, was the last time, the 2013 summer sale. I saw this game called Kerbal Space Program. I'd never heard of it. I read the description. Oh, that looks interesting. $16. Hey, can't go wrong. I bought it. And then, here it is a year later. I'm still playing it and doing a podcast. So I'm going to say that was $16 well spent.
Yeah, I think so.
But I think a lot of people probably picked it up during the Steam summer sale. And so there's a lot of people right now that are just starting to play the game. And Nas had an idea of doing something called the Beginner's Minute. He's got exactly 1 minute, and then a buzzer is going to sound. And I'm going to ask him a question. He doesn't know what the question is, but he has to answer it in 1 minute before the buzzer runs out. Okay?
I think I'm ready.
You think you're ready?
No, I'm not, but let's do it.
Okay. Tell me how to build a rocket. 3, 2, 1.
Okay, you need to go to the really big tall building, and that's where you're going to build the rocket itself. In the top left tab, you need to pick what your control area is going to be. You're going to start off with the Mark 1 command pod. You click it, it'll show up, and then you can go over into propulsion. I don't know what tab that is, but you can find it. You can go to propulsion, and you need to select fuel tanks, and then there's also boosters. So boosters give you, they just take off. Like, you can't control how much thrust is in them. If you get a thruster, you can use control and shift to increase and decrease the speed on it. And then you pretty much, you once you have all that built, then you click the green launch button at the very top right, and then whenever you're in the launch area, you just hit space and it starts your staging, which is on your left, and then you have a rocket in the air. So if you want it to come back down and not explode and die, you're going to want to put a parachute on it. You didn't tell me that you'd be dancing the entire time. That was really hard.
You know, now I'm glad it isn't video.
Yeah. Oh man.
So what do you think?
I can guarantee this will be the one segment. We didn't say this before. This is the one segment that will never be edited. And that was
tough.
Yeah, the
it?
music came in, and I didn't know what was happening anymore. I just drew a blank. I want to apologize to any beginners we have.
Hey, do you think it was educational?
I think it was something.
Do you think somebody learned something?
I think
you don't think so.
I learned how good of a dancer you were.
Yeah, as in not very. Well, do you need a moment, or can we move on?
Yeah, give me a moment.
Give you a moment.
Her name is Gilly and she's
No.
Gilly.
And now we move on to this week's crew report, where we read your letters. And our first comes to us from Damien, who says, quote, I realized that I wanted to major in astrophysics about 2 years ago. When I found this game, I was immediately hooked. I consider myself a medium to low level player with rovers on Eve and Duna, a small base on the Mun, a fairly large space station, and a few probes here and there in the Kerbal system. I play in sandbox mode. I've done some manned missions to the Mun and Minmus, even one to both without refueling. I say that's impressive.
Yeah, no, that is impressive.
I have never done that. So he's done the Mun and the Minmus, the agony and the ecstasy. He's done the Mun and Minmus without refueling, did them both in the same mission. He says, quote, I want to do manned missions to Duna, but I feel bad for stranding Kerbals. Recently, I've started to lose interest because everything I can think of to do is either too easy or too difficult. I load up the game now and just sit there thinking, what can I do? Do you have any ideas for any projects I can start that will challenge me enough to improve my skills in the game, but something that is not so hard that I quit because it's too hard? I'm 15 years old and I want to play this game for many more years because honestly, this game is one of the only games that I enjoy playing. I responded to him and I gave him some suggestions of things that I think would be fun for him to do, because it sounds like he's got some skill, obviously.
Yeah, he sounds real competent.
But what I thought would be kind of neat here is I wanted to throw this open to our listeners as well. If you have any suggestions, you have an idea about what skill level Damien is at. If you have any suggestions of fun things that he can do that are challenging, not too easy, not too hard, please write us and let us know. Kerbalpodcast@gmail.com. And moving on.
Okay, we have Dusty from Canada. When playing the game, I listened to your podcast. After hearing about Diarrhea Planet, I listened to their music and have to say I like it.
No!
I have to say Dusty has good taste. Okay, this is actually really funny. Whenever we were recording last week, you know, we finished recording, and it's usually kind of late by the time we're done. Mm-hmm. If you follow our Twitter, you've seen whenever it's like, okay, it's posted, and it's like hours after we said we started working on it. So we finished editing, and we're in the submission phase where we're just getting everything ready to upload it. And I get a text from a friend saying, "Hey, are you coming tonight to Diarrhea Planet?" And I was like, "What?" They were playing about 4 or 5 miles away from where we're recording. So I hopped into my car and I made it just in time for them to start playing their set. We were talking about them, and I didn't even know what was happening, but apparently they were playing that night, and so I went and saw them, and it was a ton of fun. So Dusty from Canada, you have good taste. Look up Violent Soho. It's another really good band.
Okay, I have a question.
What?
Do you owe these guys money?
You know, the first time I mentioned them, I thought that was going to be it. I mean, yeah, they have a funny name, but I really like the band. And
this has turned into a running joke.
Yeah. Like
this is what episode? This is the fourth podcast in a row that we've talked about. Yeah, because
the first time and then we had all those different side jokes with him. So if somebody started listening now, I'm sorry. There's probably no telling what this may mean.
See, I think like these are like personal friends of yours, or you owe them money or something. Because every week it's like you're promoting them. Yeah.
Hey, you know, I've tried to move on past it, but they keep just pulling me in.
Do they have like incriminating pictures of you, maybe?
The Diarrhea Planet has a massive gravitational pull.
Apparently.
Moving on to our next letter from Michi. The first thing I did after watching the movie Gravity was to get home from the theater, strap into my chair, and play KSP. And I doubt that I was the only one doing so. The thing I did was to send my huge space station down to Kerbin and see it all burn up. Re-entry is just one of the most fun parts about
it.
When you see the flames, you're like, oh, I don't care what happens now. That was cool.
There are times when I won't reload a mission. I won't revert back to launch simply because I like to watch everything just burn up.
Like, not just yet. I want to see the flames. He said that was magnificent.
That sounded very antisocial, didn't it?
I just hope that parts without the heat shield would eventually burn up. I managed to get Jeb into a landing capsule, but right after decoupling from the station, I noticed something which all of us have experienced. Oops. That's right.
No parachute.
No parachute. Of course, there was no way for me to safely land the capsule, but maybe I could save Jeb by himself. Even though Kerbonauts are awesome, they can't fly like a bird. But being inside of the capsule was a certain death. So I tried to get him out of the landing capsule the moment before it hit the ground, and what do you know, it worked. Jeb bounced back up into the air and came down again safely. There's always a way to save a Kerbal.
Kerbals bounce. Who knew?
I didn't know they were squishy.
Yeah, apparently.
That's probably why your little Kerbal is having so much trouble on Gilly, because he kept bouncing up and down.
Hey, I should play that song again.
Stop it. Just stop it. It's like a rubber planet and a little rubber Kerbal.
That actually leads me into the next letter that I got, and this is I've kind of put two of them together. In the last podcast, I was talking about trying to get into the orbit of another planet, and you had asked me if there was any way of determining the orbit that you come in on, and I said I didn't know, and I asked the listeners, can you help? I got two responses. I got one from John Martin and one from Greg V. And I'll read the letter that John Martin sent. He said, "You asked for tips on getting a coplanar orbit at your destination." So there's something I didn't know. It's called a coplanar orbit.
Huh.
I agree. It is hard to see the orbit because the map centers on the craft and not the destination. If you double-click on the planet, you can set focus, which will center the view on the planet, and you can see the encounter orbit much better. He's right. If you select the planet, and you can double-click on it, or also instead of set as target, you can also below it, you can say focus view. But when you do that, the minute you get your encounter node for that planet, like let's say we're Eve, okay? The minute I get my Eve encounter node, it shows me what my orbit is going to look like when I actually get there. And once you get that, you can adjust it. You can adjust it either by putting a maneuver node on the orbital line that it's showing you that you're going to have, or you can adjust simply by changing the orientation of your craft. If you need to lower that orbit, obviously you point your craft straight down. If you need to move it to the left, you point left. You need to move it to the right, you point right, and so on. Thanks to John Martin and Greg V for pointing this out, I have now been able to go to Eve and come back to Kerbin. I've been able to go from planet to planet, and each time I came in on a perfect orbit. Not too close to the planet, not too far away, the same orbital plane. It was the simplest thing, but I didn't know. So a year later, and I'm still learning.
Yeah.
I thought that was so cool. Continuing with John Martin's letter, he says, because I had talked about having a series of refueling super tankers, he says, "I like your super tanker idea, but was curious about going to Mun and Minmus. The Delta V to orbit and dock and escape is likely more than just using a direct transfer. Sending fuel to the destination is a great idea, though." In other words, he's saying, why are you doing that? Why were you refueling in Kerbin? Why were you refueling in Mun and then Minmus instead of just going straight out of the system? And I actually responded to that, and I'll get to that just in a minute. And then the last thing that John Martin said was, quote, "Here's another tip for mad science. Make a probe with 2 Science Junior parts and 2 Mystery Goo containers. Use one set in high orbit and the other in low orbit before returning. Short of EVA and surface sample, you maxed out the science if you recover the craft." Now, back to his question. Why was I redocking and refueling? Docking and refueling. This is what I wrote back to him. I said, you asked about the Mun Minmus refueling stops. I may not do those next time, but what I was trying to do was keep as much of my craft as possible. Once I got past a certain point, i.e. stable enough to not suddenly plunge to the ground, I would transfer fuel from the upper stages to the lower spent stages instead of jettisoning them. When I docked, that left me with more fuel capacity than if I had dumped the used stages. I would also top off the RCS tanks. By the time I left Minmus and the Kerbin system, I still had most of my ship and nearly full tanks. That was enough to get me to either Duna or Eve, where I had a tanker waiting for me. When it was time to return to Kerbin, I decoupled a full tank from the tanker and brought it back with me for in-flight refueling.
It's now time for news in the mission briefing. Squad has unveiled the first 6 winners in the Kerbal logo contest. In-game companies will play a big part in the 0.24 KSP update, and Squad asked users to design logos for each company. Of the hundreds of entries, a handful were chosen to be included in the game. To see the winning logos, go to the forum section of KerbalSpaceProgram.com.
And the next update to Kerbal Space Program 0.24 now has a name. It's KSP First Contract. And according to the latest developer notes, it's going to be released in 64-bit for Windows. It also looks like new sounds will be added to the game. That includes changing the actual sounds of some rocket parts such as liquid engines, solid boosters, and so on for new ones. 0.24 is in the experimentals phase right now. That's the final phase of testing before release. We'll have more details about the upcoming update to Kerbal Space Program as we get them.
The mod manager Cosmos, that's Cosmos with a K, is looking for beta testers. According to the developers, Cosmos will simplify the process of modding Kerbal Space Program by automatically downloading, installing, and updating mods for you. If you'd like to be a Cosmos beta tester, or if you have any questions, send an email to Eucarion, UCARION, @berkeley.edu.
And we have an anniversary to celebrate. July the 1st, 2014 marked 10 years to the day that the Cassini space probe reached Saturn. It was the first time in history any man-made object went into orbit around the ringed planet. Cassini left Earth in October 1997 and took nearly 7 years to reach Saturn. The orbiter carried with it a probe known as Huygens, which landed on the surface of Titan, one of Saturn's moons, on January the 14th, 2005. It was the first landing of a man-made object to happen in the outer solar system. The Huygens probe successfully sent back data to Earth using the Cassini orbiter as a relay. Since arriving at Saturn, Cassini has completed more than 200 orbits and traveled a distance of approximately 2 billion miles. An Apollo 11 astronaut is coming to Reddit on Tuesday, July the 8th. Buzz Aldrin will do an AMA, Ask Me Anything, on the Spaceflight subreddit. The AMA begins at 3 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, or 1900 Greenwich Mean Time. And that does it for this week's mission briefing, and you know what that means. And now, another edition of As the Kerbin Turns.
Honey, I'm home!
Hello, dear. How was your day?
Oh, same as always. We were trying to prove Dr. Haslein's theory of time, and I ended up on a planet ruled by talking apes. Say, I'd like to kiss you, but you're so damned ugly.
Tune in next time for another edition of As the Kerbin Turns. Yay!
Yeah!
Woo!
All right!
It's a madhouse!
You know,
A madhouse!
you know, I just kind of worry
You
for.
finally, really did it! You maniacs! You blew it up!
I kind of worry for the stress it puts on the relationship. You know, like he goes out to work each day, and there's all this stuff happening.
And then he comes home and insults her.
Yeah, he loves her deep down.
Yeah, he does.
He does.
Well, we move on now to But I Digress. And this week, we're going to talk about Prometheus, which is a movie that Nos very much wants to talk about. He has analyzed this movie down to the microscopic level. So, take it away, Nos.
A lot of build up on that one, but I'll take the mantle as long as it's between the two of us. I love this movie. Yeah, I had a lot of haters in my group that like they didn't necessarily hate it, but
It's a very divisive movie.
Yeah, you either really like it or you really don't. And what it comes down to is, I think the big thing that's the divider on anything with Ridley Scott, especially if it's kind of like Cormac McCarthy film adaptations. If you just take it as a movie, like you're going along for the ride, like it's Avatar or Indiana Jones or anything, you're gonna hate it. And it's not going to make a whole lot of sense, you know. But if you start to break down what each character means, or what the movie's message is, or the different messages at play, there's so much to chew on. It's the closest, you know. Everyone says there's more in the book. You know, like they left stuff out. It gives you the like thought crunchiness a book.
Thought crunchiness?
Yeah, where you have to sit there and you have to chew on it, and you have to like process it. It gives you all of that, and
Wouldn't
it gives
be
you
thought gum?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay.
But it doesn't lose its flavor. It gives you the everlasting gobstopper.
On your bedpost overnight.
It gives you the everlasting gobstopper of informational goodness. So if you really start to break down what each character means and then all the symbolism in it, like people walked out of the theater and they're like, what did half of that mean? But you just take the movie's title alone, Prometheus. Okay, who is Prometheus? He's the one who gave fire to man, and he was punished by the gods for it by having his stomach ripped open and eaten by birds, and then every day, and then rehashed itself.
I think honestly, the reason that this movie is so divisive is when it was in production, it was being touted as this was a direct prequel to Alien, and then at some point they said, okay, it takes place in the universe of Alien before the first Alien movie, but it's not a direct prequel.
Yeah.
So I think people walked into the theater thinking we're going to get episode 1 of Alien, the Phantom Alien or something.
Yeah.
And I think that threw a lot of expectations because they thought they were going to get one movie and instead they got a different movie.
Mm-hmm.
So, because I can tell you, when I saw it and walked out of the theater, I was somewhat ambivalent. I enjoyed it, but I wasn't quite sure what I had seen. I had to go off and, like you said, mind crunchy it.
Yeah. You have to process it for a bit.
Yeah.
So you take the narrative of Prometheus, and all that happens in the very beginning scene of the movie. You have one of the engineers, and he basically he eats this or drinks this thing. And then he falls into the water.
I think it's called mystery goo.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He takes it. He does.
That's what's in those canisters.
Yeah. He does the final experiment with the mystery goo, and he falls into this giant
mega
waterfall,
science.
and he just dissolves. And then you start to see like branches of DNA forming. He's essentially eating that. Like he took that stuff and he broke himself down and became life itself.
It's the whole chariots of gods idea that that other. Like a master race or something seeded life throughout the universe.
Yeah, and it's the Prometheus story of he's sacrificing himself to create life on that planet. And so the engineers, that's basically what they did. They had this entire noble race of people that they were going throughout the universe and spreading life. And they were sacrificing themselves in order to create life. They did that, and they made life on a place that we now call Earth. And man was created, and man did not continue the process. So they say around 2,000 years ago, they sent a second engineer to try to set everything straight.
And I hear he was really good in carpentry.
Yeah. And so he goes and he tries to show everyone this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to spend your life trying to create more life. You're supposed to propagate the Earth, and then move on to the stars and start new life there. And it's not about you, it's about what you can create. And they didn't like him very much, and they sort of got rid of him, and so then we sort of, they leave little benchmarks showing this is where we came from. The main characters in the movie find those, and they launch this giant mission in order to find out where humans came from. And that leads us to the planet the ship is called Prometheus.
Right.
And
the planet is LV-226, I think.
So they land on 226, and they start to explore everything. And lo and behold, this all happens around Christmas Day. And there happens to be...
No symbolism there.
Yeah. And they discover all this stuff, and you see all these people's reaction to the unknown, and you're either repulsed, scared, intrigued, it excites your curiosity. And you have the humans who they want to know, but they also still want to be in control of everything. Like, I want to know where we came from, and it's because it's about us. Then you have David 8, the android, and he wants to know where everything comes from because he is basically questions incarnate. Like he's curiosity incarnate. He wants to figure out everything to the point to where there's reckless abandon, to where he doesn't care about the well-being of others. He cares about the truth. And in seeking that truth, he bypasses any completely selfish prospects of it.
Well, any sense of morality.
Yeah. What ends up happening is he starts experimenting with the people who created him, because he was made from people that weren't interested in propagating other life. They're interested in their own selves. They're interested in that selfishness. Well, these selfish beings that weren't doing what the engineers, made them for, they made something to serve them. Instead of making things to serve others, they made something that serves them, an android. And so he starts acting out of his own selfishness and pursuing curiosity at their expense. And so he starts experimenting on them, experiments on one of them, and he gets, lo and behold, a woman who can't have children pregnant. And she gives birth to that thing on Christmas Day. And it's cut out of her womb by something else. So now we're just mashing up everything. So we have the Prometheus story of it being removed. We have the whole Christmas Day narrative of, a immaculate conception. And we have the selfishness of man meeting the selfishness of its own creation.
I like the, it's kind of hard to see, especially the first time, but when they go inside that, I don't know what you would call it, the hangar or the temple or whatever that building is that they go into, you get that shot of a mural, and it's an engineer with his abdomen torn open.
Yeah.
A direct callback to Prometheus.
Yeah, and so it's like they're only listening to the parts of the story of Prometheus that seem appealing. It's like if you were to only hear the story of Icarus because flying is cool. like Icarus is my favorite because he got to fly.
Right.
No, it's like the story of hubris. And,
right.
Yeah,
so forget about that whole melting wing stuff.
They named the ship Prometheus because they thought it was really neat to find out where the fire that gave them life came from, not about all of the pain and all of the unpleasant things that it takes in order to bring life, and the selflessness that it takes in order to propagate it. The engineers, they seem like really bad, when you watch them, but what they were doing in the first place was a very good thing. It's a very selfless thing, but their own creation sort of corrupted them, because you notice the amount of anger, it would be like watching Gandhi slap you, because you were just being so against what would be good. So, it would
be a non-violent slap, though.
Yeah, so they pretty much decided that if these creatures, humans, keep expanding, they need to be stopped. So they have to make instruments of war to wipe them out.
And that's the black goo.
Yeah, that's the black goo. It's basically a giant chemical weapon.
Which, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is it gets away from them. Somehow or the other, that weapon turns on them, and that's why they're all wiped out by the time the humans get there.
Which is a sign of working out of vengeance gets you nowhere. Even if they were trying to stop something evil, they had to become something dark in order to stop it. And it backfired. If they would have continued on and continued, making other civilizations and stuff, maybe the humans might have caught on, but they sort of fell into the same trap that the humans did.
Well, I guess to sum up, Prometheus is worth a second shot, especially if you were unaware of some of these subtler aspects to it. Nos says give Prometheus a second shot.
Yeah, please. I mean,
please do.
Just give it another view, and instead of trying to just follow along with the story, don't go through the motions with it. Actually, just question, why are they doing what they're doing, and what do they represent while they're doing it? You'll notice that a lot with Ridley Scott, especially when he and Cormac McCarthy got together and did The Counselor. If you just watch that movie just to watch a crime drama,
or Cameron Diaz have sex with a car,
yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and you're so out of the loop that it's hard to piece together a story. But if you look at what each character represents, it's extremely fruitful.
Okay. Well, that wraps it up for But I Digress. And I guess that wraps it up for our 8th edition of Kerbalcast. We have a list of folks that we do want to thank. As always, we start with you, our listener. Anybody who has downloaded or listened to this podcast, thank you so much. We would not be here without you.
We'd like to thank anyone who contributes by writing to the Crew Report and all of our regular contributors.
And leaves us reviews on iTunes. Thank you very much. Also, the moderators at Kerbal Space Program and the Kerbal Academy subreddits. You can find links on the front page of both of those subreddits, Kerbal Space Program and Kerbal Academy, links to this podcast.
We'd also like to thank Professor Soap. He provides all of our music. You can find him at facebook.com/Professor Soap.
And as always, you can contact us by email. It's kerbalpodcast@gmail.com.
You can also reach us on Twitter at Kerbalcast.
Until next time, I'm your LNP, that's Lunar Module Pilot Biff Aldrin, and our CMP, Command Module Pilot,
Nostromo.
Happy Kerbaling!
I ended up on a planet ruled by talking apes. Talking apes. Talking apes. Talking apes. Today on Talking Apes. You know, we could have made that the name of it, too. That's our other podcast.
Is slipping on a banana really that fun?
Poop throwing techniques tonight at 5. And now it's time for the progress report.
And this week we're going to talk about Prometheus.
I thought we were talking about Teen Wolf. What?
It's a madhouse. A madhouse. You don't know what to do to that. Okay.
Can I stop? All right. Okay, we're done.
Okay,
yeah,
we're done. We're done.